On the agenda tonight, we're going back to 1966. We're going to be taking a look at Paul Revere and the Raiders, and they're going to be performing Kicks. Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus, and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. So let's get the guys up on screen, and we'll watch it the whole way through because it's only 2.5 minutes in length, as was the case back in the 60s. The songs were, on the whole, very short in length, and hopefully this is going to be alright from a copyright perspective. I do not know, but let's jump into it and see what happens, and see how Paul and the guys get on.
Paul Revere and the Raiders!
Last night. But when you wake up in the morning, the world still beats you uptight. Oh, there's nothing that you ain't tried to feel that emptiness inside. But when you come back down, girl, you still ain't feeling right. And don't it seem like it's just keep getting harder to find? All your kicks ain't bringing you peace of mind. Before you find out it's too late, girl, you better get straight. No, but not with kicks. You just need help, girl. Oh, girl, you think you're gonna find yourself a little piece of paradise. You ain't helping yet, so girl, you better think twice. Oh, girl, don't you see, no matter what you do, you'll never run away from you. And if you keep on running, you'll have to pay the price. And don't it seem like it's just keep getting harder to find? All your kicks ain't bringing you peace of mind. Before you find out it's too late, girl, you better get straight. No, you don't need kicks. All to your view face, that will lead straight, that road leads nowhere. Girl, I'm gonna help you find yourself another way. Oh, you don't need kicks, girl. No, girl, no, you just need help, girl. Oh, girl, now girl, you better get straight. And don't it seem like kicks just keep getting harder? You don't need kicks, girl. No, girl, you don't need kicks.
And there we have it. So, first of all, full disclosure with the performance, we have got a live vocal, but everything else is a backing track. So you can hear on that backing track, we have got the sound of that 12-string guitar, where especially in the riff, we've got that higher octave that is being emphasized, but you can see as well that the guys would be playing wireless here, but wireless wasn't invented until much later, so 1966, the year of this performance. So from that vocal perspective, Mark Lindsay is the only one who is live here, and he gives a solid vocal performance. Range-wise, we're talking about B3, C4, around that kind of area, so about an octave lower than that male tenor high C that I mentioned in lots of other videos. So it means that we've got a vocal here that's comfortably within Mark's range, and it's something that I do emphasize in a lot of videos about singing within your range, and that's certainly what we've got here. The backing harmonies do get up to E4 in the chorus, around that kind of area, so yeah, not getting up to the G4s and the A4s in that male tenor range, being in that comfortable range, being able to communicate the meaning of the song without straining the voice. And the meaning of the song is a really important point to bring up, because with this performance, we've got the choreography and the dancing at the same time, and it's very upbeat and seems quite happy, especially when you add in that choreography. But this is about drug use and getting kicks and trying to say that you don't need to get kicks from drugs. So it's one of those very early, or I say one of those, there weren't very many anti-drug songs around this time. It was all very upbeat and suited the feel of this song with the other songs around at the time, but that lyrical content was certainly a lot deeper. Just before we get the guitar out, to mention about the composition and its length being so short, but the way that we've got this riff in the intro that then continues in the verse, and we're then straight into the pre-chorus, little run down into then the chorus, and so much is packed into this 2.5 minutes. It's actually less than 2 minutes because we've got an intro in the video as well. So once you start looking at each section, it means that once you've heard the song, you've got to hear it again because there was so much in there. We've even got the middle eight, or the bridge as it's called, which is a total departure, but it's really clever in the way that it's been put together because it gives the illusion of a key change by the end of the song for the final chorus, but there hasn't been a key change. We're still in exactly the same key and progression that we were previously. It's just that because that middle eight, or bridge, is such a departure from that progression, it sounds like we've gone somewhere different on the journey, but we are in fact visiting somewhere that we've seen before. So just quickly getting into the guitar, there's a fair amount in here considering the length of the track. We're starting with the riff that continues into the verse, and there are a couple of versions of this, or at least you can hear the two separate guitars that are going on. In the beginning we hear this like that, and from then on we have the octave of that run is being played on a 12-string guitar in the studio and what they're pretending to play along with. So it means that the higher end of that, the octaves of all of those notes, are being more emphasized and they cut through a lot more higher in the mix. So the second time that we hear the riff, we then get the G at the end. So we have this, that G there, and then we get back into it again. So I'll try and sync this up in the edit so that you guys can hear what it sounds like when you put the two octaves together and why it sounds the way it does. And that's what would be happening if I was playing a 12-string. You get the octave above of the note that you're playing on those top 3 strings. Anyway, so we'd have this 1, 2, 3, 4. Kind of like that. And the first riff that we hear, it's that like that, but pretty much throughout the verse underneath that vocal you hear the open G and just that G full stop. It might be doubled up, like I said, by Paul on keys. So then just jumping into the pre-chorus, once we've got this, we're into our D flat, and then we have this little rundown, which is effectively going to be an F minor, the top part of it. So you're borrowing your first finger as far as the D string, so that when you place on your third finger on the 3rd fret of the D string, we get this, and we have this. So that's just a semitone rundown with the 3rd finger, the 2nd finger, down to the bar, and then I'm going to go all the way down to the open D, and we go back to the D flat and C7th into the chorus, which is going to be our A flat, that kind of thing. And actually it's more like a stabbing rhythm on those first 2 downstrokes. We've got that. and then back into the riff. So jumping into the middle eight, or the bridge as it's also called, I know that it's going to be a little bit simplified with our shapes up at the top of the guitar, but in the studio they would have layered this up and they would have had a 12 string as well, so you got 2 strings ringing out at the same time. But when you play it on one guitar, it sounds a little bit weak to have this. But there's definitely that change in order to have the little fill in there that just tweaks your ear. We would then move to... Not sure if that fill happens on the last chord, but if I was playing this just with one guitar, I'd probably go to the full versions of the chords, or at least try and make the sound as full as possible. So starting with that F, we have this, and just put in the sus4 there, just because it's giving you access to a root note and you can get the chord to ring out while you play the fill, which is just a little bit more efficient, I think. So then it progresses to the D minor, but you'd have to swap over your third finger and your little finger in order to give you access to this same fill sound that we've just used on the F. So we've got this that. Then we would get into the B flat, and this is going to be a bit of a stretch now. So we've got this, and if you wanted to stretch into the C as well, but that at least gives you access to fuller sounding chords and keeping the little fill that we have that you can hear in that middle eight. We've really been taken on a journey. This is why it sounds like a key change, or it might register as one, because we've gone so far off the beaten track with the chords that we've just heard. When we then jump back from this, see? And then we're into our A flat, straight into it, and it's such a departure from the previous chords that we've just heard. And that's why it sounds like we've gone somewhere totally different, but in fact, we've just gone back to where we were. Just to mention as well, in this video, Drake Levin isn't on stage. I think this is around the time that he did some military service, so he wasn't appearing in this particular performance. But I do want to get into the background of the band just a little bit, because it is interesting how it all started out for these guys, because Paul was in his early 20s and he owned some restaurants, and he needed to go to a bakery in order to get supplies. And when he went to a bakery, he bumped into Mark Lindsay, and they got talking and obviously hit it off because they were both into music and had aspirations to be successful musically as well. And we're talking about the very early 60s, and technically these guys had their first hit in 1961, and that was called Like Long Hair, and that was just an instrumental, but it did get to number 38 in the charts. So off the back of that success, they toured the USA, and when I say they, it didn't include Paul because he'd been drafted for military service at that time. Mark was pumping gas as a job now, and they replaced Paul with Leon Russell. And if you want to check out Leon independently, I've got a video on him on the channel here somewhere. But by 1962, Paul had returned from his service and was reunited with Mark. It just so happened that a DJ called Roger Hart was organising teenage dances at the time, and he was looking for a band to book for one of these dances, and he spoke to a bank teller who told him about Paul Revere and something. He couldn't remember the name of the band apart from the Paul Revere part. Anyway, Roger managed to get in touch with the guys and book them for this teenage dance. He was impressed so much that he then became their manager, and he suggested that they recorded a version of Loué Loué, which they did. And that is what Columbia Records then heard and were suitably impressed themselves to then sign the band. And interestingly, the Kingsmen had a huge hit with Loué Loué. So in the mid-60s, they were having huge success. They were emulating the sound of the British invasion bands at that time, and they had a huge hit with Just Like Me. That got to number 11 in the charts in 1965, and they appeared on TV regularly. 1966, they had a hit with Kicks. They were having loads of hits at this point. I'm just highlighting one or two of them, and this particular song got to number 4 in the charts, and in 1967 is when they went through quite a big lineup change, and I think that was due to the fact that they did have session musicians playing in the studio, and a lot of the band wanted to play the instruments themselves and have more input in that, whereas I think some of the band saw it as other people playing the instruments and them not really being a band, but then other members thought that the Wrecking Crew, who it was at the time, were just embellishing their songs and just adding in extra parts. Nevertheless, in the 70s and early 70s, they were now known as just the Raiders, and in 1971 they released Indian Reservation, and that was a monster hit. That got to number 1 in the charts. It also got to number 3 here in the UK, and it went platinum, so a huge selling song. Just to mention about Indian Reservation, because that was effectively a solo single from Mark Lindsay, because none of the band, it was all the Wrecking Crew that played on that. None of the band members at the time played on that in the studio. So it was just released under the name The Raiders, so it was seen as obviously a Raiders track, but it's just one of those things. It harks back to the fact that the Wrecking Crew were involved previously, and they certainly were involved heavily on that song. But I don't want this video to go on for too long. Paul Revere and the Raiders, another one of those huge bands of the 1960s and early 70s, and it's great to have a look at them here, even though we've just got the live vocal, but we've got to be thankful for that, because so many shows and TV shows at the time relied purely on backing tracks, whereas at least we get to hear a full-on live vocal here from Mark Lindsay. Thank you guys so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!